The full tutorial of the Urban Modular Board. Hi there and welcome to Good Enough Scenery, and in today's video I'll be showing you how I made every single tile that you're seeing in front of you here. It's a double modular board, meaning that the river can be put all sorts of different ways, the road can be put all sorts of different ways, and all of the tiles match up with all of the other ones. So I'm going to be showing you in depth how I made every single one of these. Later on there'll be videos about the scattered terrain that you're seeing as well, but this is all about the tiles themselves. To support the channel, what you can do is follow the links in the description for buying any materials should you wish to make one of these yourself. But let's get into it by starting with the planning process. Now this is going to be a 5x4 board, and it's made up of a few different tile types. So you're going to have some straight river pieces, we're going to have some roads crossing rivers, we're going to have this, which is a updated version of the tile you just saw. We're obviously just going to have some plain roads, we're going to have some corners, we're going to have a T-piece, and we're going to have plain tiles like these ones here, as well as corner rivers. With all these different tile types, it was important that I made a board that could actually work in a number of different ways. I wanted a board where the river could be the main focus, the road could be the main focus, or they could both be combined to both be the focus. So let me show you what I have come up with. And what I love about corner pieces is that you think, oh, if it's 5x4, that would have to go all the way over there. So this would be the fourth one. But equally, this can just be another bit of river at the side here. So if it wasn't clear already, the black bits are road, the blue bits are the river. The river will definitely not be blue, and anything that's this grey colour, that is concrete pavement style stuff, which is going to be open area or space to put scattered terrain, of which I'll be making a whole bunch of different fun things. So this is one where the road and the river are both a strong focus, but we can have it an entirely different way. So this design has the road much more as a focus. The river is there, but it's all at the sides. So you have nice big open areas here and here with road space as well. But what if you wanted the open space to be the main focus? So here we have the river and the road pushed to one side, and we have a lot more focus on a big open area in the centre there. But there's a number of other designs as well, such as this one. So with this one we have the river going out of the sewer outlet here and then double backing itself, I don't know why, and then we have a nice smooth road all the way through it like that. But what I love about this board is that it's the simple kind of interchange. You could have it be crossing there rather than there. And then we have a very similar but a different design altogether in terms of, you know, how the road is positioned. So how does this work? So we have one sewer outlet, we have two river road crossovers, three straight road pieces, we have one T-junction, three corner pieces, three straight river pieces, two river corners. So 21 tiles in total for a 20 tile modular board, which I think is okay. So to start with, you're going to take a bit of XPS foam. I've cut this to be 30 centimeters square, and then I'm going to make a grid on it that is lines every 10 centimeters, both across it one way and then perpendicular to that as well. So basically you make a big noughts and crosses board. Now we want to make this look like concrete, so the way that I do that is then by taking a wire brush and stroking it quite firmly in one direction across the whole thing, and then I go across it with a ball of tin foil to bring out some kind of rocky texture. Now you can go as light or hard on this as you want to. I went pretty hard on it because, you know, I want this to be kind of long time weathered concrete which would no longer be smooth. After I'd done that, I went back over the lines that I'd made. And now at this point, you can just leave it like this, and that's a perfectly good tile. But I'm going to show you the crater one first of all. And we do be dipping in and out of what we do with a plain tile, but this is what you're going to do if you're going to make a crater tile. So I just slashed across it at kind of random direction and then broke it into pieces as you're seeing here. And this was going to form the kind of main structure of the thing. So there's going to be a hole there like that, and then some raised bits of concrete in it. So I did the same kind of technique of just slashing across it with a knife and then breaking it into pieces, and this would form the rubble that is going to fill up that. But you know, if it's broken up, it's going to have to look a bit more wrecked. So I took the edge of my steel rule and just ran it across the very straight edges, which should definitely not look straight if it's broken up into pieces. And it ended up looking a little something like that. But you know, if it had broken up, it needed some cracks. So I just went across it with a biro quite randomly, adding cracks here and there and everywhere, just wherever I felt like it would be sensible, and then cutting a couple of other chunks out of it because it just felt a little bit too kind of geometric, shall we say. It was then the case that those bits of rubble needed to be more broken up, so using a biro and using the tin foil, I just took off the straight edges that were left and just made them all a bit more rubbish looking. Then I had to stick it on a board, so I took a 30cm square board. I did a very gentle spray of black spray paint, just so I knew that the hole would have some black underneath it. And then I used some instant nails to put the pieces down. Now I'm not using a hot glue gun here because it's important that you're going to be accurate when you're making a modular board. So you don't want, you want a good chance to get it right. Instant nails isn't actually instant, whereas hot glue gun more or less is. So just kind of putting some stuff down and then just lining it all up with the sides, and then I put a couple of pieces in the middle just to kind of bulk out where the rubble was going to be risen up from. Now it's on to painting. So I took some brown paint that I had already and I started mixing white into it, and I appreciate that this kind of base colour may look a little bit strange, but trust me, it's worth doing. I mean, you end up not seeing it so much, but then if you look closer, you do see the details of this creamy browny colour coming out. So I quite like to do it, but it isn't actually necessary. You could just do a white dry brush across the whole thing and not bother with any of this other painting. It's good enough scenery. You do what you feel is good enough for you. Now, if you're just making the plain tiles like these ones here, then you do exactly the same thing. So full coat of that kind of light brown creamy colour. And then on top of that, once it's dry, you're going to go with a grey. So with this, you're going quite wet with it. You're not trying to get into all the details. It's kind of like a very, you're painting it, but you're painting with quite a vertical brush, so you're not getting into all of the details, so that the brown that you've painted earlier still shows through. Then I kind of spattered like black drops in random places and just kind of mix this in with the still wet grey paint just to create some random lighter grey, darker grey across the whole thing, before then going on and doing the grey paint on the rubble bits. So doing exactly the same thing with a grey overcoat if you're doing a plain tile. So that's what happens with that. So I just want to show you the before here for the dry brushing, because I think sometimes it's not obvious, and in the light that I was doing, it's quite early in the morning, you can't really see it as well as I'd like to. But I'm going to dry brush in white the whole thing. The white kind of loses a bit of its colour, so you know, white is the one to go for rather than light grey, or was in my case. But just generally loading up the brush and keeping it perpendicular. So this is the before again, and then I'll show you the after, so you can see how much of that detail just pops out just by doing that quick dry brush. And then obviously you have to do it on the rubble as well. There's a theme developing here, have you noticed? Now, if you're just making the plain tiles, I just want to show you how to attach things. So 30cm board, 30cm MDF, instant nails in between, squidge it down, line it up, and that is literally it. You can put some weight on top of it just to hold it. Now, you don't have to, if it's just a plain board, you don't have to be entirely accurate. So this board was about 29.5, and that meant it doesn't matter if it's not up to the edge, you just don't want the wooden edge overhanging. Then back to the crater tile. Here we have my glue gun, and I just stuck down these bits of rubble in random places where I felt it looked good. I didn't really have a plan. I just kind of made it up as I went along, as I quite often do when I'm making scenery, and it ended up looking like that, which I was pretty pleased with. So, but it needed just a little touch more, so I added a couple of different things. So starting with this strong PVA glue, I went on a few places with this, and this was where some bigger rocks or bigger bits of rubble would be forming, which I'm going to use literally use stones for, and then I spread it out a little bit with a brush. Then I took some normal PVA and went on a few other places, keeping in mind exactly where I'd put the stronger PVA, because that's where I wanted to put down. These are small stones, so just little piles of small stones where the strong glue was, just wherever I felt, you know, I tended to put that where I felt like they might be. Didn't, again, really have a plan, just kind of made it up as I went along. You know, another theme developing, so I just chucked that down wherever I thought was right. And then on the rest of it, you're going to put, well, what I put down was grey stone flock, which is this stuff here. Chucked it into a little container just to make the sprinkling out a little more accurate, but essentially just sprinkled it all over the whole thing, and then finished up by soaking the whole thing in a mix of PVA glue and water, just to kind of really soak it down. Now, if you want to go crazy with this, you can make a hole like I did with this one, chuck some broken pipes in. You can see the pipes tutorial as part of my industrial series, and then mix up some resin. And I went full yellow on this one, and so left that to cure a little bit, and then tipped the whole bunch into this pool. Now, it looks a lot better on camera there before doing anything than it did in real life. It didn't quite look right, because I wanted it to look like a horrible toxic mess. So I started dripping different colours in. Jazz became interested at this point, so she joined in, and I just chucked all these down. So I think I put in a flesh colour, a yellow, an orange, and then a kind of light brown. And it occurred to me that I could sludge it all around just by tipping it. So tipping it to the absolute limit so it didn't spill out, but you know, was able to kind of mix up a little bit, and it ended up looking like that. And that was nearly what I wanted, but I just put a couple of extra yellow drops in just to finish it off. And honestly, I really love how disgustingly gross it looks. So that's how you make plain tiles for the double modular board. All of them are relatively easy to make, I think. So for the straight one, to begin, we're going to take a 30cm tile, and you're going to cut it into 10cm strips. I use my hot wire cutter, but you could just simply use a sharp knife, and that's the basic construction done for that one. If you want to do a more broken one, then you can cut a strip off, which is going to be difficult with a knife, easier with a hot wire cutter. The tops of all of the rows in this are simply spray painted black with this cheap black spray paint at various different distances. It will melt it, but I've decided that's a good thing because it's going to create a completely random broken texture on the surface. Now for the pavement parts of it, it's exactly the same as you might have seen in part 2. So you're going to scrape across in one direction using a wire brush, and then you're going to roll over the top with tinfoil. Now in terms of the kind of construction of it, that is it. You will have to add some lines on as well to match up with the rest of it, but those are very simple to do. All it's going to take is just to measure out a 10cm length in on each edge and on each side, and then making those all meet up so that you have lines going across. Now, this may not make any sense, but if you've seen the other part, then you'll understand why this is done. It's because it all kind of makes it join up nicely with the other tiles. From there, you can take a biro, and this is entirely optional, but you can add some cracks and damage just by you know, drawing them on with a biro. Not a huge amount of pressure required, just draw something on, and it will probably look half decent. Now, for the top of the road, I bought some of these yellow marker pen and a white marker pen. I'll put a link in the description below for if you want to buy one of those. But they are absolutely perfect for drawing on the road markings. So just draw a line down each side from the same distance in, and then kind of a dashed white line down the centre. Now for the concrete on the pavements, it's exactly the same as in part 2, is just giving a creamy undercoat first of all. So this was done on all of the pieces. I'm not going to be showing this in the other parts of the video later on, because it's exactly the same thing, but just covering over. Now you actually try and get into all of the cracks and nooks and crannies with this colour. From there, once that's dried, you see it kind of goes much browner because of the darkness of the foam. After that has dried, you're going to be putting on this grey base coat, which looks browner in this light, but yeah, just grey, and you're not trying to get into the nooks and crannies, you're just going over it. And you can see here, this is the dry brushing phase, but you can see here that the brown kind of shows through on the lower levels and the greys on top. But this is just dry brushing quite heavily in white to bring up all of the details that you put in by having the foam rolled and by doing the cracks, and that's what it ends up looking like. And that's basically that's a very normal straight road piece done, but I decided I wanted to do a kind of a broken one as well, so I literally just grabbed the strip and just snapped it in a few places. Now, I was a bit nervous about doing this, to be perfectly honest. I spent a bit of time doing it, and I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, but eventually I just went, you know what, I'm just going to break it. So that's what I did. Because the thing is that being Fallout inspired, a lot of the roads are all over the place. So I thought, you know, I need to have something that's similar, but it still need to match up on the ends. In order to provide a bit of support for the broken bits of road, I just took random bits of foam and just put them in a few different places, and then just took some time sticking down the edges of all of the broken road pieces to the edges, as well as being, you know, if they were resting on a bit of foam in the middle, just making sure that they were attached to that as well. So nothing particularly complicated here, just using a hot glue gun and sticking the bits down, just making sure that they don't kind of overlap the edges, because if they did, then it's not going to match up with the rest of the tile. So yeah, nothing particularly complicated here, and I think it ends up looking quite decent, because it just looks like a broken bit of road in my opinion. Once I'd glued that down, I took the edges, or the pavement pieces, and saw where the cracks matched up, and just did a little bit of extra damage. And then it was a case of just hot gluing the two pavement sides to the road piece, and then that formed just one solid piece, which was later then glued down to a base. So nothing difficult here, just a line of hot glue. I mean, arguably you don't even need to glue them together, because they're going to get stuck to a base anyway, but I decided just for completeness that I would, and that was the end of the straight one. Now the T-junction is a similar thing, so you're going to start by just measuring 10 centimeters in from each edge, and on one side you're going to draw a line all the way through. Another one you're going to go 10 centimeters down, miss 10 centimeters, and then do 10 centimeters again. I mean, it's not particularly difficult to draw yourself a T with these measurements, but essentially you've got a 10 centimeter strip down one side and then 10 centimeter squares in the corner. And then just using a hot wire cutter, you can just cut those out, or you could use a knife, and that's the pieces that you end up. So that long bit, two 10 centimeter squares, and your T. And we're going to do exactly the same thing with the concrete, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of depth for this, just showing you that that is what I did. So that's what it looks like once you finish with that. And then you go through the paint job, and that's what it looks like there. Then I drew on the road markings. Now, to be honest, this is something I should have done a bit differently, but I didn't. And maybe I should have looked up better what road markings look like, but hey, this is what I ended up doing. So drawing a line that you know, down each edge and going, oh, this is probably what a T-junction looked like. I don't think it matters too much. I think no one particularly cares, at least to all me. So this is what it ended up looking like. And according to this line I just put here, it is driving on the left-hand side of the road, which will infuriate most of the world, but I'm in the UK, so I don't care. And then just finishing off the dash lines here as well. And I think it ended up looking fine, although I did end up covering it with a bit of flock later on. But you see that one matches up perfectly with the one that I'd just done. And finally onto the corner. So again, I'm measuring 10 centimeters in from each edge on one side, and then on an adjacent edge doing the same. Now, on the future ones, I used a compass for this. If you don't have a compass or you just want to do something really quick, you can use pan lids like I did here. I recommend if you do have a compass, then you use a compass, because the ones I did with a compass ended up looking a lot better. But I drew a straight line in from the edge and then curved it off with the pot lid, so it doesn't have a parallel feel to it, this corner, which doesn't bother me that much. But if there's if you want it to be parallel, use a compass and it will give you a parallel one. Now you'll see that on the other tiles, but yeah, just simply cutting those pieces out, doing the concrete thing again, as you can see here. Once again, exactly the same as the previous one, as well as spray painting the road just like the other one, and then marking out the grid thing on that. So once again, that's just 10 centimeter sections, drawing lines on, and then adding any damage that you want to add onto it if you want to. But that is the construction part of it complete. Yeah, you can see just me adding some cracks on just because it's kind of quite nice, and you can cut bits out with a knife as well just to add some further damage, and you can use a bit of tinfoil just to kind of roll that and make it look a bit more worn, shall we say. But essentially that's the construction part done. Now this is something which when I say perhaps, I mean definitely should have done differently, but I didn't. So I did this straight for a bit and then I free-handed it, and I'm not the greatest free-handed person. It went okay, but it definitely could have gone better, particularly the central line, but I think I ended up covering this in a bit of flock anyway because I wasn't very happy with it. And that's the beauty of covering stuff with flock, is that you can just hide your mistakes. So yeah, no apparent reason, decided to freehand this. Like I said, with the other ones, I used a compass to find the center of the road, and then just gently did it with a pencil first, and then went over it with the white line marker. But it looks okay, not good, not terrible. And then finally, once you've kind of stuck all these together, you notice this one has got flock on it now. I haven't included that because I'm going to do a different video on adding damage and stuff. But yeah, once you've made it, you can just glue it down with instant nails onto a 30 centimeter MDF board, make sure it doesn't overlap, and that is how they are done. So to begin with, I had pieces of foam which were 30 by 14, that's centimeters, not inches. Now I've got my hot wire cutter here with the wire set at a very specific angle here, which meant that when I pushed it through like this, it created a nice is it a mitre? I don't know. But it created an angle, so that's a good thing. And, if you do a bad cut when you're, marking out the 30 by 14, you can always cut off the bit that you want. And I advise that you keep the bits you cut off, because a nice angled piece like that is always good to have. Now, if you've seen the rest of the series, you'll understand what's going to happen next with the concrete bits. So what I do is I take my wire brush, and for the angled part, I went down at one angle and then perpendicular on the other part, and that just creates this nice kind of ridged detail. And then I rolled over it with a bit of tin foil, and then, as you will have seen on the other ones, I marked 10 centimeters along to create this kind of grid pattern across both pieces, and that's so that it joins up seamlessly with the other tiles. Then I stuck it down, so this is going on a 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter piece of MDF board, and I've got instant nails here. Now what I've done is I'm smothering it on, then I'm pulling it one way, and then I'm pulling it back the other way. That's just so that I know that I've got the instant nails right up to the edge, and just want to make sure that's nice and aligned with the board, because that's going to make the next part easier. Next up was the painting. So first of all, I went with the brown, covering absolutely everything, and then just painted the central part black. Next up, just using some lighter grey here. So you can see this has just had the brown on it, but all the colour's just been sucked out of it by the colour of the foam. So then it was grey on top. Whilst it was still wet, I added a couple of drops of black, and I kind of scooped them up and moved them places so it wasn't too heavy. But then I'm just like scuffing it up just with a brush like this, so that I've got some nice random colours. And there's lighter bits, there's darker bits, and it's all pretty random because it's definitely not a uniform colour when it comes to pavements and concrete. From there, I waited for it to be completely dry before going over it with a white dry brush, and you can see this brings out all of the detail from it being rolled with the tin foil, as well as the scraping it with the wire brush, and it ends up looking, I think, like concrete does. So this is quite a simple process. Now this is a really important part to get right, so I'm using some acetate sheet to dam up the ends, because you do not want a resin pour leak, because they are not fun. I have learnt this the hard way. Now, the best way I have found to do dams is with acetate sheets and UV resin. Now, the UV resin dries completely clear, so it matches up really nicely with the resin that you're going to be pouring in. So I'm putting a little bit on the ends, and then I'm filling up the inside of it with resin, UV resin, which sets off really, really quickly with the UV light, and then continues to set even harder in just natural daylight. Now, once you've poured some resin in, I was like tipping up to the end there, just so it's going not just at the edges, but right up to the ends. And then I'm doing, just to be absolutely sure, I'm doing the inside edges as well, so that no resin goes underneath. Then it was a case of adding some bits and pieces to the inside of the river tiles. As you can see, I was doing a whole bunch of them at once. So this is some forest floor flock. I mean, it doesn't particularly matter what the flock is. I just chucked some stuff in. So I added some like greeny moss type stuff. I added this forest floor stuff, and just trying to make it look like a dirty old sewery thing. It's not trying to look like a river. It's trying to look like a sewer runoff. Also made some little rocks. These are just offcuts of foam, which I just stuck with a glue gun. Just randomly put different pieces down so it looks like rocks or whatever had gone in. Then I added some sticks as well. So these are literally just sticks I found on the floor, and I'm breaking these up with my hand and breaking these up with scissors and just chucking them in completely randomly. You notice I'm not sticking these down. The rocks I did because they, if it's supposed to be a rock that's heavy, it would sink. With this stuff, I don't really care. It can float if it wants to. It can, it can sink if it wants to. Doesn't matter. And then I sprinkled in some of this grey stone flock as well, just to act as a further kind of gravelly, stony type thing. And that was that. Then came the resin pour. Now, this resin I think is fantastic. I'll put a link in the description below to it. It's a 50-50 mixture, and this tub could not have been much more full. But with the resin pour, it will come with instructions. Follow the instructions for your resin pour. Don't follow it from anywhere else. Now, best tip with resin pour here is to have, when you pour it in, have your things off of the ground or off of the table or whatever they're on. So I just put a little bit of foam underneath them, and that's so that if they do leak, which these ones didn't, thankfully, if they do leak, you can see it quickly, and also it doesn't kind of just stick and run underneath it. And then in terms of the pouring of the resin, I just chucked it in until it got to a height that I was happy with. I just added a little bit of green to the colour of the water so that it was a bit more gross. But yeah, nothing more complicated than tipping a liquid into a thing. And just in general with resin pours, like, don't do it and then leave the house. I suggest that you do it and keep checking on it every kind of 15 minutes, half an hour, something like that, so that you can see if anything starts to form. And then once that has set, which takes maybe 48 hours, you can pull the dams off. Sometimes they come off really easily. You'll notice here that I added some hot glue to the dams as well, just because I was being extra precautious, because like I said, resin pour leaks are not fun to deal with. So just pull them off and pick off any glue that's on there. And yeah, that is your straight river tile complete. How I made this disgusting drain. But how do we make the sewer one? Well, let's get straight into it. So this is a 30 by 30 tile, and we've got two strips of board which are 10 by 30, this is centimeters, and they've got these angled pieces, which these were just offcuts from the previous section, but they are kind of 2 on the height and 4 on the length, and then the angle between them makes the rest of it. And then you've got a couple of bits that are 20 mil or 2 centimeters high, just to kind of finish off there, and that is what the base of it is going to look like. Now for the taller bit, I'm using some of my 50 mil foam, so I started by cutting off a huge strip of this. So this is going to be 60 long, which we'll cut it in half in a minute, and it's just the 10 centimeters, no, that can't be right, yeah, 10 centimeters high, that's right. And so I cut that strip off, and then I cut that in half. So the way you do this is with a nice sharp knife, and then just gradually building up the depth, and then flipping the whole thing over, and then comes apart nice and easily like that. So you have one bit on the top like that, and then have another bit in front there, but that's going to be cut down to a smaller size. But not going to be cut down straight, so I measured in the angle that I wanted it to be at, and did that on both sides, and then I cut through the angles just like I did before using a sharp knife. Now if you've seen this series before, you know how I do concrete, so this is very, very simple. So I've got a wire brush, I'm going to go stroking all in one direction, just to kind of really rip up in lines, and then get a ball of aluminium foil and roll it across, and that combination of the two ends up with this kind of very random concrete looking texture, which especially when painted, adds a genuine belief of what concrete could look like. I managed to have my pen the wrong way around there, so that's clever of me. Now here I'm just drawing some lines in here, because I've got like a grid pattern for this board, and then you can use a biro just to kind of add in some more detail. And out of absolutely nowhere, I decided to get a rolling pin and just smack it, and then put the rolling pin back. So if you want to dent in your thing, then apparently I hit it with a ruler. I don't remember doing this, but obviously there is video with proof to show that I did. Now once I've made this hole, then a little roll with the aluminium foil just to kind of make it match up with the rest of it. Now back to our kind of drain exit sewer outlet. I don't know what it's called. I'm going to have trouble naming this video, but you can see what it is. So just using a compass, just drew a hole. I think it was 8, maybe 10 centimeters. Then put a hole in it with some scissors. Now if you've got a hot wire cutter, the way I did it was to post the wire through, then join it up, and then it was nice and easy just to cut round with this. But you could slowly build up the depth with a sharp knife if you don't have a hot wire cutter. Then turn it off before touching the wire, detach the wire, and then you can pull it out, and then you have a hole in the middle of your thing. And then you need to mark out, you don't have to mark out, but I marked out the bit that I didn't have to do the concrete work on. Now for this concrete on the taller sections, what I did was I just did the wire scraping, but I did it to a kind of a greater depth. I didn't roll the kind of vertical sides with the tin foil, because I wanted it to have that kind of like liney feature that kind of more creamy beigey coloured concrete tends to have. So going side to side with the wire brush, and that's it. And that's the kind of stage we're up to there. So those are all the main constituent parts made, and then from there it's a case of painting it. So all of them had a base coat of this kind of beigey browny colour, and this is trying to get into all of the little details. I decided to not paint the inside of the thing so much, but yeah, the outside of all of it, strong base coat, getting into all of the nitty gritty. And then to add the illusion of depth to this hole, I painted a jet black circle in the centre of it. Just basically eyeballed this, and then took the thing and just made sure that it was about right. It doesn't matter if you go a little bit over, so that's what I do with that. The next stage is to do a wet brush with this kind of light grey. So what I do is I go over that, not trying to get into all the little details. Then I just put a little drop of black paint on it. You may have seen this in the other sections, and then just kind of spreading this out so you get a real kind of random, some light grey, some dark grey, just to kind of mimic the randomness that kind of you get on kind of worn concrete. From here was dry brushing all of it, so I didn't do the grey layer on the raised sections. I just dry brushed the whole thing. So dry brush the front and the sides, and the top as well. And then you'll see in a minute that I will be dry brushing all of the pavement bits as well. So nothing complicated here, just adding some white paint to a brush, getting the excess off, and this is like a genuine dry brush. So you may have to go back to get a bit more paint on, get the excess off, and keep going back over it, but it really brings up that detail. Now it's time to stick it on. Now I choose to use instant nails for this. This and many of the other products I'm using, you'll find a link in the description for these. Now I use instant nails especially when there's lots of parts, because you get a lot of working time with instant nails. If I was to use a glue gun, it would set almost instantly, so unless you absolutely nail it, pun intended, then you can find that you've glued it in the wrong place. So with instant nails, you put it down, and then you've got a chance to kind of jiggle it and move it around as you need to. It was only at this point here I realised that I'd done all this work on the back section of this board, and most of it wasn't going to be seen. So I'd done a lot of work I didn't have to do, so you don't have to do as much work as I did. Anyway, so I used instant nails for this as well. I mean, this one I probably could have got away with a glue gun, but seeing as I had it out, I thought I would do the same thing. And it's, unless you're in an absolute rush, instant nails is not a bad thing to use. So that is it, construction-wise, mostly complete. And again, to add the illusion of depth, I just painted this bit black. down the centre. I mean, most of it's not going to get seen. It's going to have a load of stuff put in it and resin as well. Speaking of resin, really important that you dam up your river things as well as you possibly can. So the best way I have found in multiple different ways that I've done it is to use acetate sheets, and this is UV resin that I'm putting on. So this is a very sticky resin which gets set off by UV light, so you can leave it in daylight. I recommend that you get a UV torch. So I'm just kind of smearing some on the acetate sheet so it sticks to the outside, then kind of building it up on the inside, and that's along all the edges as well as like where you're joining it. Then put some at the back, and then I put some all along the inner edges as well, as you'll see in a second. And that's because resin leaks are an absolute nightmare to deal with, so it's best to be really overcautious than, you know, be a bit lapsadaisical about the whole thing, because, you know, if you have a resin leak to deal with, it isn't fun. So yeah. Next up, it was time to put the grid, the railings, the bars, whatever these things are. And I used some old sprues, so I found them about the right length, and then sprayed them silver. Next I put some spray adhesive on, and this is just to sprinkle some play sand on top. I was being very, very careful initially about doing this, and then I decided to just chuck it down. Now this is to kind of add the idea of corrosion and rust. So once they were dry, I decided to drop one, and then I picked it up again, and then I put it in the foam like this. So I thought this would be the best way of painting them. Then I'm using something called Typhus Corrosion, which is a Citadel technical paint, which adds even more to the idea of the corroded look. So I was quite pleased with how these ended up looking like this, and sticking them in the foam was a great idea in terms of painting them, even if I did paint my finger. Next up, to complete the corroded look, I went for some Riser Rust, which is another, it's a dry Citadel paint. So again, just putting some on a brush, getting the excess off, and then kind of dry brushing across the sandy and corroded bit, and they ended up looking like that, which looks like rusty metal bars as far as I'm concerned, so I was very happy with them. Then I added some green. If I'm completely honest, at this stage, I don't really think this green was particularly necessary, and I don't think it added much to the look, so if I was to make this again, I probably wouldn't bother. Next up was to put the bars in, so I took some angled tweezers, and I used these to kind of push in vertically because it made it easier to get into the hole, and then put a little bit of super glue in the hole, a little bit of super glue in the top of the bar, and then pushed it down into the hole, and then pushed it back vertically up, so it was super glued at both ends. Little bit fiddly, but you know, not the worst thing in the world, and I just ended up doing that with all of the rest of them as well. And then on the final one, I decided that it would be good if it was just one that was just sticking out at an angle, just a little bit of extra kind of feature. At this point, I realised I had one too many, and then thought, well, maybe one of them fell out, and just decided to randomly glue it somewhere in the river below, because, you know, why not? And this is the stage that we were at this point. Now I wanted to have some, like, the idea of some flow coming out of this disgusting sewer pipe. So I took some cling film, cut it into little strips, and then I added a little bit of super glue to it, and then pushed it in with the same pliers as before. Now this was quite fiddly, if I'm honest, and you know, maybe I would add the cling film first and then do the bars if I was to do it again. But yeah, just a bit of fiddling around with super glue and tweezers, and it, you know, it all ended up fine. Just put a few different pieces of cling film in between each of the bars, so there was a nice flow coming out. And then picked, I think this is Mournfang Brown, something like that, so it might have been Gore Grunter. Yeah, Gore Grunter Fur, I think this was a contrast paint. I just painted the cling film brown just so it looked horrible and gross. Then it was a case of putting all of these different types of flock and stuff. So I've got these vines, which is like fake moss, I think it is, and just wrap them around the bars using the pliers, and then cut them into like little pieces just to be just bits of foliage and stuff that is just going to be floating around the river. Then took some, I think this is forest flock, but it's this multicoloured, gross looking stuff. Then I took some actual sticks from the garden and cut them into pieces and just chucked them all in randomly so it looked like a sewer outlet. And then I did the resin mix, so I'm not going to go into detail on this. I mean, just buy some resin. There's a link in the description for the one that I've got here. I found it to be good value and good quality. And yeah, there's a two-part mix, 1-to-1, mix it up. I added some green and brown to make it a little bit gross looking, and just started putting it in. So I wanted the idea of flow to kind of carry on with this, so I got some on the stirring stick, and then was just like kind of chucking it in there to get it dripped off. And then I remembered about this thing called gravity, and decided that it'd actually be a lot better if I just put it at an angle like that. So that's how I did the rest of that. And then just essentially just filled up the river bit. You can't see, it's an absolutely terrible angle I filmed out, but all I'm doing there is pouring some in and then scraping up the side with the stirrer, then adding a little bit more resin at the end. So I'm just kind of eyeballing the depth so it's roughly the same as the rest of them. On towards the final details here, so I've got some chunky paper clips, they don't have to be chunky ones, and then I'm bending up at a corner, then very accurately measuring like 3 plier widths before then bending again. Now these are going to be ladder rungs going up the side of the sewer outlet, so just doing that and then snipping off. So not a very difficult thing to do, you just need a firm grip and a pair of pliers, and it's as simple as that. So I made, I think, 10 for each side. Some were complete rungs. I did a couple that were kind of just like snapped off ones just to add a little bit of variety. Now I decided they should be 1 centimetre apart, so you just kind of put the ruler up the side and just put some dots on them with the pen, and then made them a bit deeper with the paper clip that I'll be putting in. Now to put them in, I found the best way was to grip firmly with a pair of pliers, line it up, keep it flat, and then just push hard. I found using my hands was I couldn't get a tight enough grip on it, and it was kind of slipping all over the place. So you know, just grabbing with the pliers and pushing it in hard, I found to be the best way of doing it. So I did that across both sides. And then afterwards, I just put a drop of super glue. And this, what I loved about this is that you put some super glue on there, and it does 2 things. So it kind of goes onto the metal and it kind of falls inside of the hole, so it glues, but it also kind of creates this kind of stream of ickiness that the paint we're going to be doing in a minute kind of attaches to. So it kind of does 2 things in one. Back to our typhus corrosion, and this was a very, very quick job. I mean, just put a little bit of it on the brush, and then put some on every single rung, just to make it all look all a little bit rusty. I didn't do the rise of rust on this. I couldn't tell you why, it just didn't feel like the right thing to do, so I didn't do it. So I did this on both sides, and yeah, so you'll see in a minute that there are rungs on the other side as well. Then I took some brown and just like chucked it in randomly just to make it look a little bit dirty, sort of adding more grime towards the bottom where there would have been kind of water build-up. And then did the same thing with some, I think it's a skeleton horde. So every single rung hole I put a drop of that on, and it created this kind of stream going down of where rust and water would have fallen down. It's getting this kind of nice rusty stream. And then I took some green paint, so it's kind of similar to what I did earlier, but kind of made it really kind of watery, so it kind of dripped down in places and just looked all horrible and grimy. And there wasn't really a huge amount more to do after this. I did some other stuff with some Euphonian Camoshade, and then to finish off I took some dark brown paint. I mean, I tried to dry brush it, but you can see how much paint I had to take off by how much is on that bit of cardboard there. You'll see a better close-up in a minute of what I'm actually really doing with this. So yeah, it did end up being pretty much a dry brush. So it's really kind of dirtying up the whole thing, and this was the very final stage of it, just to finish it all off. And I'm genuinely very, very pleased with the results. So it looks horrible, it looks grimy, it looks gross, it's got disgusting stuff coming out of it, and best of all, it matches up perfectly with the other tiles that I've made. So I started by taking some 20mm XPS foam. I'll put a link in the description as to where I get this. Normally I get it from Amazon, so I'll put a link to exactly the stuff I buy. And I cut this into 14cm strips. And we were needing a few of these for this, so I cut, I think I cut 2 full lengths, and then one of them I made 14cm square, and then another strip I made 30cm long. In fact, I made 2 of them that were 30cm long. So for this piece you need 14 centimeters squared and 2 which are 30 by 14 if you're following my exact thing. Now using my hot wire cutter here, I changed the angle to a preset angle that I've used for the other river pieces, and I cut the ends off, like one off the smaller piece, and then I put that through with its angle pointing towards the hot wire cutter to create this kind of 45-degree corner type thingamy. I don't know what to call it, but I think it ends up looking pretty cool, even though it's just a couple of angles cut off a square piece, because yeah, it ends up looking like that. So that's and I keep those pieces because they can be useful. And I did exactly the same with the 30 centimeter ones, just by cutting off one long edge. So this is your opportunity to cut off any bits of it that you didn't like when you know, if you made a mistake when you're cutting it and there's a bit of a nick out of it, you can, this is your opportunity to right that wrong. Now from here, it was a case of taking the bigger pieces and making them sure that they meet. And the way that we do this is by making a 45-degree angle. So I made sure that I matched it up perfectly, put a little notch in where it met up, and then drew a line directly to the corner like that and cut through, creating this beautiful 45-degree angle. And then rather than measure it, what I did was I used the one I'd already cut to as a jig for the other one, so that I knew when I put them together they would meet together perfectly. And construction wise, that is all that you need for these pieces. Now in terms of making it look pretty, or rather gross should I say, starting by making the foam look more like concrete. Now if you've seen the other videos, you know how I do this. So I begin by taking a wire brush and pulling it firmly across the surface in one direction like that. I do this across the sides, and I do this across the top, and it ends up looking all scuffed up and kind of liney like that. From there I take a rolled up ball of aluminium foil, and it creates this rocky, concretey, uneven surface that I think makes it look like concrete. Now to make it match up properly with the other tiles, I then drew these lines at every 10 centimeters, and then drew a line where the slope begins. And then using a biro, you can just add in some extra cracks here and stuff like that. Or you can also do what I did here, was take a rolling pin out, smack it to make a little dent, and then kind of roll it out with the aluminium foil just to create some unevenness and some brokenness to the surface. And it ends up looking like that. Next up, we have to stick it down, so I'm using instant nails for this. Now the reason I'm using instant nails rather than a hot glue gun is because you want to make sure that this is nice and accurately stuck down. And instant nails, despite the name, isn't actually instant. It gives you a firm stick pretty quickly, but it gives you some wiggle room, whereas a hot glue gun doesn't do that. And what we want is our accurately cut board and our accurately cut pieces of foam to match up perfectly. So I use instant nails to make sure that I can put it down and then so jiggle it around millimeter by millimeter until it's in the right position. Once that was set, I took some browny creamy paint and did a base coat. Now I'm literally covering, I'm not trying to leave anything out. I'm trying to get down into every little detail with this kind of base colour. And you'll see in a second that once this is dry, almost all of the colour gets sapped out of it by the black foam. But before it was dry, I took some black paint and just painted down the centre of this sewery bit, just to give the illusion of depth. So this is it dry. And this is me chucking on some light grey paint just to kind of just scuff it up. And then what I do is I randomly just drip on some black. I don't want too much of this because it can be quite dominant, so I used a brush to kind of dot it around a bit. And then all I'm doing, and this bit isn't sped up, believe it or not, this is just me scuffing the paint in random directions so that I get different levels of black, grey, white, all kind of mixing together to make a kind of very random, uneven looking concretey surface, or that's the idea at least. So it ends up looking like that. Then once it was dried, it was a case of dry brushing it. So putting some white paint on a brush and getting most of the excess off, and then hitting it at a kind of perpendicular angle, and you can see it begins to bring up all of the details, and that's what it ended up looking like here. Next up was to put the dams on so we could do a resin pour. Now I've got some acetate sheet which I've cut into a strip which is wide enough to cover the end, and then I'm using what's known as UV resin, which is a clear resin which sets when it has a UV light put on it, so it can be daylight, but you can also, and I recommend that you use a UV torch, which you can pick up just about £4 or £5 from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description for the UV resin and the torch, so if you can get them if you want them. Once that was in place, just put some on the inside as well, just to be extra sure that it was absolutely sealed, because I've had resin leak underneath the tiles before, and I don't want it to happen. This next section is all about making the river look gross. So you can see all the different tiles, the road ones, the corner ones, the straight ones, and I was chucking in random bits of gross flock. I've made some small rocks out of some leftover foam and stuck them down with a glue gun. But everything else, these are little bits of stick, there's flock, there's, there'll be some sand and grainy, gravelly bits in a minute as well. But I'm just chucking it in. I'm not sticking it down in any way. I'm just chucking random bits down into it just to make it look like it's a sewer that's had bits fall into it over the years and hasn't been cleaned or cleared or anything, and it's just abandoned, shall we say. And I think it ended up looking pretty good. Next up was to mix up the resin. Now just follow the instructions for your resin. This is a 50-50 mix. I did a lot of pouring all at once. I put a little bit of colour in there just to kind of add some grossness, so it ended up look like a very kind of murky browny green colour. And in terms of the pour, just want to be happy that your dams are secure, and then just tip it in. Now what I like to do is put an old bit of foam underneath whatever I'm pouring on, so that the tile is raised above whatever you're pouring above, so that if you do have a leak, it doesn't then glue the tile to whatever you're gluing it to. I've got a big piece of cardboard down to kind of secure everything. I don't think you need to be afraid of resin. I think you just need to be cautious. I think you need to take the if it's the first time doing it, then double up on the dams, put extra kind of hot glue and stuff and whatever, but it's not that bad. Once it was all completely solid, after a couple of days, I pulled off the dams that I put on, and it ends up with this kind of cool looking clear end to it, and it's all kind of gross and horrible, and that's the tile basically complete. Gaming Ward. Hi there and welcome to Good Enough Scenery, and I'm going to be showing you how I made these two epic looking river, road, bridge, tile type things that form part of the modular board here. So there's going to be two main tiles here. The first one is going to be this one here, which features the girdery style steel edged bridge thingamajig, and then the second one will be this one with the broken stripy barrier type thing. Now they're made exactly the same way for the most part, and then I'm going to show you how I did the sides at the end of the video. So let's get into it. So we start with our hot wire cutter, but you can also use a knife. And here I am cutting a 30 centimeter square thing into strips that are 10 centimeters. And you're going to need one tile, one part that is 10 centimeters, and then I took the other ones and I stripped them into a 14 by 10, and I need 4 of them, and they are going to form the kind of the river side bits. So I changed the angle on my hot wire cutter to the one that I've used on all of the other river pieces. If you haven't seen those videos, then do please check them out. This is so that they all match up. So 4 pieces that are 14 with the angle cut off, as I just showed you, and the central piece, which is this long one here. So that's 30 centimeters by 10 centimeters. I then took a bit of, I think it was the center of a cling film, and then just pressed down hard on one edge so that I could make a hole for like a gutter type sewery type thing going through the center. And once I'd done that, I got my daughter to take out some rage using a rolling pin on one of the pieces whilst leaving the other one completely fine. This was also spray painted black, which I neglected to film or mention at all, but I just mentioned it now. Now, if you've seen the pavements or the other videos in this series, and you know exactly how I'm going to be doing the concrete edges, so scraping across a wire brush on one side and then going over it with aluminium foil, just rolling it across the surface there. Just to be extra fancy, I decided to do that on the side of the road tiles as well, because I decided that would probably be concrete. Now, in terms of painting it, did a creamy brown coat on. This is completely trying to cut into every single nook and cranny. A lot of the colour gets sucked out of that. I did that did the same colour on the sides of the road as well, where I figured it would be concrete as well. And then once that was dry, you see a lot of the colour comes out. I put some of this light grey on and just kind of scuffed it onto the surface. Then whilst it's still wet, just putting a tiny drop of black paint on it as well. And then that allows me to scuff up even further, just completely randomly, and create a blacky, grey, whitey, random colour that I feel like I feel like it ends up looking like concrete. Then was the dry brushing in white, so I just dry brushed the edge of the road pieces here, and then dry brushed the entirety of the concrete parts of both tiles. So there's 8 pieces for the 2 different tiles there. Then I stuck both of them down, so I'm just going to show you one of them here. So using instant nails here, which isn't instant, but it gives you some working time and a strong bond once it's done. So I just stuck the pieces down roughly, and then I know it's a 30 by 30 tile. Now, in one direction it's absolutely fine because it's determined by the width of them, but when you're going across the span where there's the gap in the middle, it's important to measure it and make sure that it's getting it right, and then painting the center of the rivery bit black. Now, just like with the other river tiles, I am doing a resin pour, and it's important that the resin stays in that bit. So to do that, I'm using acetate sheet and UV resin. So just cutting some strips which are going to be tall enough to make sure that they are covering the height that the resin is going to be. And then using the UV resin, you can use this like glue because of the clearness of the acetate sheet. And then just putting some on the down slope as well, so that it doesn't leak out the side. So just giving a gentle pull there, just to check that it's adhering properly. Now, I really didn't want a resin leak, and resin can get anywhere. So anywhere where the tiles were joining, I chucked some UV resin down and sealed it. Did that inside of the underneath of the river tile by the road tile by just dripping loads on the edge, and then just tipping it so it all kind of dribbled down. Then I took that outside. It was a nice sunny day, so you could see it, and I took that outside so that it could be set with the UV from the sunlight. From there, it was a case of putting the road markings on. So just as I've done the previous road tiles, using these white and yellow pens, using a previous tile as a guide for where they're going to go, and just drew them on nice and simple. Strongly recommend you get some of those pens if you're going to do something like that. Also, like the other river tiles, as you see me doing here, just put a load of crap and flock inside of the river bit. So different types of flock, cut up some bits of foam and kind of rolled them a little bit with the aluminium foil to make them look like rocks, and then stuck them down with a glue gun. Really great shot of my right shoulder coming up. I'm sure you were all signed up for that. So there it is in all of its glory. And then putting some gravel and stones in as well, just exactly like the other ones, just to make them really gross. Then was the resin pour, so it's a 50-50 mix, just whatever resin you get. That's linked to that one in the description, but just follow the instructions on that. Put a little bit of colour in it, and then, as you can see, nice dirty brown rivery sewery water. Gross. So I recommend holding this slightly above the surface by putting like a block underneath it, tipping the resin in slowly, seeing how much it settles down, seeing where it runs, and then using like a tool that comes in like the resin kit just to kind of push it around. And then once it's dried 48 hours later, you can peel off the acetate sides, leaving this cool solid bit onto the sides. So I'm going to make this out of plasticard, which is this stuff here. And first thing is to draw the design on, so I've got tried a couple of different sizes. I think that the slightly bigger one is going to be better. It's not that difficult to draw either, so this is basically, these are all equilateral triangles with 4 centimetre sides. So the whole thing is 16. As we've got a nice straight edge to go with, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just see how far along this goes. So it's going to go to there. Now, if you haven't got one of these, a set square, then get one because they're very useful. So this angle here, that is 60 degrees, which if you know your geometry, that is the angle on an equilateral triangle. So I'm going to get this lined up with here. I'm just going to draw a line up here, flip it over, same thing on the other side. Now we can measure 4 centimetres up along this line, same on the other side. and we can draw a line between. Now we can do marks every 4 centimetres on the top and on the bottom. Now we can draw the internal triangles to this, which will be a little bit fiddly, a little bit time consuming, so but it's not that difficult. So put a mark at 1/2 centimetre. That's kind of parallel to this line here. I'm going to do the same right the way over here. I'm going to draw a line between these 2 marks. If we look at our design here, this is going to be this thing here, so we don't have to do it all the way along. Okay. Now we can measure it 1/2 centimetre in from here. See what that is? So that's just there, like that. And you put another mark up here, or what I'm going to do, which is probably a mistake, is just to eyeball when this is parallel to that, and just do doing the same thing here. A smaller equilateral triangle in the middle of the bigger one, so I'm going to do that across all of the rest of them in exactly the same way. So that's ended up looking like this. Been a bit wrong now. Is it perfect? Possibly not. Is it good enough? Yes, it is. These lines here, the ones we drew first on the triangles, the bigger ones, those are going to show where we're going to be putting pieces later on. It's the smaller triangles that we're going to have to cut out. So, brand new blade. This is 1mm plasticard, so it's not difficult to get through, but it's something which has to have care and attention. Quiet you, a coffee machine shouting at me. So making sure that we're lined up with our line, and then what I'm going to do is slowly build up the depth. Because if you try and you put too much pressure on and try and push too hard too soon, then the knife can easily slip on this stuff. And now I'm going to come from the other direction like this, go to our line there and just a little bit, not too hard. You can see that's the one line cut. Takes a little while, and there's quite a few to do, and I need to do 2 sides of this as well, so it's going to be a time-consuming thing. But I'm really hoping that this is going to have been worthwhile. I guess if you're watching this video, you'll have already seen what it looks like, and you go, yeah, that was worthwhile. But I don't have the luxury of hindsight at the moment. The important thing here is to kind of start at the point of your triangle and then go along the line a bit, because it's the points it's the end parts which are going to be the more difficult ones. So same again. This ruler is desperate to slip. 2 sides done. And I'm going to try something here. Or am I going to try something, or am I just going to be sensible about it? I'm going to be sensible. I was wondering whether if I scored this line, whether it could just snap off, but I think I'm really glad I actually went with the white, the 1mm white plastic card, because the thickness of that feels right for a steel bridge side. So it's going to take me a while, but I'm going to cut out the rest of these. It's taken a while, but those are the triangles cut out of the rest of it. So what I found was that this is a thinner blade. I'm not going to be trying to really cut with this, but this is perfect for scoring the line so that you can begin things off. So it's nice and sharp as this one is. It's a really nice score mark quite quickly. And then at that point you can go for your bigger one that you don't want to be using force of a snap away blade. Okay, next we're going to take our plastic card again, and we are going to cut a 1 centimetre wide strip. So the top, the bottom and the sides all need one, so a 16, a 12 and 2 4s. So I'm going to cut another one of those and then cut those to length. Now I'm going to take this strip, which is 16, and mark a line all the way down the centre. Right, now that's done, we can do the scary bit. I could use a hot glue gun for this, and that would give me more working time, but it would also likely mean that there's a lot of leftover glue splodging out. So I'm going to be bold and use super glue, which might be my first mistake, but okay, no guts, no glory. My plan here is to cover up the entire line. If I cover up the entire line, then it should be dead centre. Yeah, but the thing is making sure it's vertical, but it's a flat surface on a flat surface, so it shouldn't be. Yeah, that's pretty good. I might have nailed that. So next up, that's I'm going to put some glue on. I'm going to make sure that this is lined up with that. Trying to force, so let's make sure that it doesn't. Oh. There we have it, looking pretty solid. You know, you could leave it like that, that would be good enough once painted and stuff. But as always, I'm going to go and do some more. So it involves cutting another strip of the plastic card. Right, we're going to cut a thin strip of this, very thin. And I'm going to cut this into 4 centimetre pieces. And the idea with these is that they are going to be cross pieces to go in here. 5, 6, only 12 of these. So I'm going to cut those 12 and then I'll be back. Okay, so no prizes for guessing what happens next. So we have our pieces here, and we are going to glue along the line here And then very carefully place this along the line. And on to the next one. And there we go. So I'm going to do the same with the rest of them, and then the same on the other side as well. This is where we're at. Not perfect, but good enough. But what we're going to do to help this, so where the join is there, I mean, we could have cut off things at perfect angles and whatever, but I'm not going to do that. So anywhere where it's a bit like could be better. So here's a great example. What I'm going to do is some super glue. I'm going to chuck a whole bunch on there. I'm going to get a pinch of sand and drop it on there. And hopefully when spray painted it will look like it's a rusty join. So we can do that anywhere. If we put it there, it could be a little bit better. So chuck some there. I do not like this play sand, so I wouldn't recommend getting it for this, but I bought it and then used something that wasn't perfect. It wasn't great, but yeah. So I'm also going to just chuck some super glue in random places there. And some places on this side that could be better too. I shall leave it a minute and then I'm going to tap it off. Not a lot should come off now because super glue dries very quickly, as you know, and then we're going to spray it silver. So one of the reasons I painted the underside when I sprayed it, one because it was just easier to do it than not do it. The other was so that I could do like a patch test with different blues that I've got without, you know, spoiling the rest of it, and I've decided I'm going to go for this one here, Cloudburst Blue, not Cloudburst, I don't know what that is. So we have our two sides done, so I'm going to show you painting part of one. I mean, it's not going to be particularly complicated. So we've got our Cloudburst Blue, going to put quite a bit of that in there because it's not a small thing. And from here, in the most part, we're just going to be slapping it on. So when my brush starts getting a little bit more empty of paint, I'm not exactly going to, I guess I'm doing kind of a dry brush. I'm not trying to paint it. I want some of that kind of metallic to show through. So going over the rusty bits when the brush is drier. I'm going to be getting the paint on, but once the paint is on, I'm just going to try and even out any brush strokes, just by kind of being a bit stipply with it. So that is what I'm going to do, and then I'll be doing some like coppery type colour and rust on the rusty bits, surprisingly enough. So okay, these have been painted, but they are still a little wet, but that's okay. Yeah, Talos bronze, going to paint the rusty bits and then a little bit around it as well. Yeah, I can do that across all of the rusty areas on both sides. Next up, I'm going to take one of my favourite named paints, Screaming Bell, and I'm going to put a bit on the brush, but not too much. And this isn't, we're not dry brushing this, we're going perpendicular to the surface. Just to add an extra colour to this rust. I'm not trying to get into every little detail, but just adding a bit more colour to it. Okay, final stage, we're going to use some Riser Rust, which is a dry paint from Citadel. This is our real bright orange rust effect. Hope you can hear jazz in the background. So I'm going to load this up, get the excess off. If I bring this up here, hopefully you better see. really nice bright orange colour on it. Just like you have with real rust. So I'm going to put this on the rusty bits obviously, but I'm also going to place it, just put a few bits on the edges there like that, just to show some extra areas of possible corrosion. So I'm going to do that on the rest of it. Now obviously I could just glue these on and it would be absolutely fine, but that means that this is going to be much more difficult to store, so I want to come up with a different way of doing that. And we're going to do that using some magnets. Before we do anything with the magnets, I want to make sure that this is going to go exactly where we want it to go. So this is 16, this whole thing is 30, so it needs to be 7 in from each edge. So I'm just going to put a tiny mark there that I can see. Next up, we are going to take some super glue. So I might do it at the bottom of each of there and there. I'm just going to put some just there like that. I'm going to place these magnets in the centre, like there. So this is the full stack of magnets going on there right now. And then the same at, I haven't got the best magnets, so I'm working with what I've got. So I'm using quite a few. I wanted to use some slightly wider ones, but they are too wide and they would poke out from underneath the thing, so poor planning on my part. So obviously only the nearest to that magnet is glued, but we are going to keep the stack on there. I'm going to line this up with our marks we put on earlier, which is there and there. Make sure it's lined up with the edge, and we're just going to push down like that. And lo and behold, we have our two positions where our stack of magnets is going to go. So once again, just to be clear, line up the ends, line it up with the side. Once we're happy with the position, just going to push. There we have exactly where they need to be. Okay, now we've got our holes. I'm going to squidge a whole bunch of hot glue in there. And we're going to put it in there like that. We'll let that dry, and then the hope is that the magnets get stuck, apart from the one that's super glued to the underside of the bridge. So that'll do, pig. That'll do. Now for this other bridge tile, we're going to do something a little bit different. Rather than having the girder type bridge sides, we're going to have more of a barrier, which someone's clearly going to have broken because this tile is all kind of broken up. So got our XPS foam here, and this is 14 centimeters wide, which is going to be absolutely fine in terms of length for that. So we're going to cut a couple of strips of that. There we go. That's all that we need. And then tear it up a little more. Notch that. Get our aluminium foil, and we're going to give it more of a concreted look. Yep, I'm going to be happy with that. And next up, I'm going to paint these white. This is not going to be a dry brush. I'm going to do a strict coat all over in white, and you'll see why in just a second. Or if you've seen the finished build, then you'll know why already. So these barriers, I've probably given them 4 coats of white to get them this white, which is a lot of white to put on, and I've said white a lot of times now. Now, once we've decided how they're going, so on the top here, put a bit of a mark, roughly every, well, I'm doing pretty much exactly every ½ centimetre. I've got a set square here, but what I'm going to do is going to line up this edge of the set square with the bottom here, and then this edge with wherever we've put a mark. So, and we're just going to draw along that line. Nice. It doesn't have to be, we're marking an area rather than trying to mark the thing, so I'll probably press a little hard on the first couple there. But I'm going to draw a line across the top. And this is marking out an area. Yeah. Okay. So we have, now we're actually going to do it on the other ones. So lines are drawn on all of them. I'm going to use some Mephiston red, which isn't a colour I use very often, to paint alternate lines on this. Normally when I do craft, I'm just using very cheap paints to paint stuff. What I've found is if you use a cheap red paint, it can be a little bit watery. If you're painting over something that's white already, it can end up being, turning it pink, which is not really what we're going for. Not really the vibe. So, and if this was a real life thing, it would be painted itself, which means that human error could have occurred whilst it was painted. So similarly, human error can occur whilst we're painting this. So let's bear that in mind when we're doing that and be kind to ourselves if we make any mistakes. So nothing particularly complicated here, just painting every other section. So they are, they're good, I like them. The only thing that I don't like about them is they look too clean. So I've got some skeleton horde contrast here, and mainly focusing on, I think the bottom is gonna dirty this up a little bit. So when I first put the brush on, that's when I'm going to be concentrating on the bottom, because that's where most of the dirt will be, and then as it becomes less full of paint, I'm going to work that a little bit higher up. But basically just like that. So just to make it look a bit more old. So I'm going to do that across the rest of it. All that remains now is to glue these down. So I've put a mark 7 centimeters in from each edge. Where this is kind of broken down, I feel like this should be a bit broken as well. So I'm going to snap it so it's in a couple of pieces. So nothing complicated here. I'm going to put a bead of glue along here. Try not to put too much on. And I'm just going to align it with the road and align it with this marker put down. And there we go. Tempted to break this one too. Probably broke that a bit more than I meant to. Hey ho, well let's just half glue it back together. Now that looks kind of cool. I'm going to put the glue on this bit. Something like that. Et voila! And here it is in all of its glory. Couldn't be much happier with it. It's all come together so nicely. My most ambitious project yet, and I think it's great. I love the modular river and modular road, the fact that it's going to be all over the place in different ways. I love how gross and dank and dirty and horrible it is. Like I said, all of the scattered terrain you're seeing, you can see tutorials of that coming soon. I'll be covering all the different types of ruins and stuff like that. Bits from the industrial series are available on my channel already. Now, if you'd like to support the channel, you can like the video, you can subscribe, you can hit the notification bell, you can leave comments. If you want to financially support the channel, then buying anything after following the affiliate links in the description below will mean that I get a kickback from Amazon. So any materials that you want, follow the links in the description and buy it from there. I'll catch you for another video soon.